Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the session on land laws. Today I am going to talk about the women's land rights. In my previous session, I had talked about the land acquisition process in India and Panchayati Raj, in which I had given an overview of the right to fair compensation and transparency land acquisition, rehabilitation and resettlement act 2013, in which certain important provisions I had discussed with you. Section 4 is there regarding the notification by the controller, under section 6 regarding the market value, the addresses, the concerns, their issues raised by the landowners with respect to their land which is acquired for the law for public purpose by the government. So these important provisions I had discussed, what is the impact of that act and what challenges were faced by this. So in today's session here, I am discussing here women's land rights. So I will talk about the gender disparities in land ownership, the legal provision for women's land rights and challenges and the potential solutions. So first I will start with by giving an overview of the importance of land rights for women's empowerment. Land rights are a crucial aspect of women's empowerment because land rights typically refers to the right to use, ownership and transfer of land. So these land rights are very important for the common people, for their basic amenities, for their livelihood, and it also plays a crucial role in women's empowerment, and it plays a significant role in enhancing their social, economic and political status. So here is a brief overview of why land rights are important for women empowerment. Because of certain reasons like economic empowerment is there, increased economic security by giving the women, by providing the land ownership in favor of the women. It provides women with a stable asset base, enhancing their economic security and reducing vulnerability to poverty. So it enables the women to invest in agricultural activities, they generate income from that and access credit using land as collateral. They improve their livelihoods by the ownership and control over the land, which can lead to improved agricultural productivity and food security. So women can diversify their income sources through land-based activities such as farming, horticulture and livestock rearing. So this land rights are important in many ways for empowering the women, like they have given the economic empowerment by which they are enabled to invest in agricultural sector, in agricultural activities, generating income for them. It also improved their livelihood by giving them control over the land, the ownership which are given here to lead to improved agricultural productivity. And social empowerment is also given, like they enhance their social status because land ownership, it can elevate women's status with their families and communities, giving them a stronger voice in decision making processes. So it challenges the traditional gender roles and norms that often marginalize the women. So this also enhance their social status. Reduction in gender biased violence. So the evidence here suggests that women with secure land rights are less likely to experience domestic violence because they have a control, because they are independent. They can do whatever they want. They have the control over the land. They can access. So they are less likely to experience domestic violence because no one can take advantage of their position. So land ownership, it provides women with the option to live abusive relationships, contributing their overall well-being and safety. It also gave them political empowerment, not only economic empowerment. It increased participation in governance because women with land rights are more likely to participate in local governance and land management committees. Their involvement, it can lead to more gender sensitive policies and practices in land administration. So, they are more likely to participate in the local governance and the land management issues, committees. So, this increased their participation in the governance also. Legal and policy advocacy is also there because by securing land rights, it empowers the women to advocate for their legal entitlements and demand accountability from authorities. Their participation in policy making processes, it can derive reforms that promote gender equality in land ownership. Their intergenerational impact is also there because inheritance and succession rights are also given to the female, because ensuring women's land rights, it can have a positive impact on future generations by promoting equitable inheritance practices. Daughters as well as sons, they benefit from secure land rights, leading to broader societal changes over a time. By this, they have educational opportunities also because it can provide financial stability as well that supports children education, particularly for girls, and it educated women are more likely to understand and assert their rights, perpetuating a cycle of empowerment. And sustainable development is also there because by the women here often play a key role in managing natural resources. So, by this they secure land rights and it can enable them to adopt sustainable land use practices in their life. It empowered women who can contribute to environmental conservation and climate resilience efforts also. Community development, because by this one the women's land rights can lead to more inclusive and equitable community development. Empowered women can drive community initiatives that benefit the wider society, such as health, education and infrastructure projects. So, by giving the land rights to the women become more empowerful, they become more empowerment, they can achieve more incentive in their life, like by educational opportunities they are likely to understand what their land rights are, how they access it, and how can they can use or save themselves from the activities of the other person who encroach their land rights. Now, I will talk about the gender disparities in land ownership. Gender disparities in land ownership have been a long-standing issue across many societies worldwide. Women often face significant challenges in accessing and owning land, which can have profound implications for their economic empowerment, social status, and overall well-being. So, however, there have been legal provisions and initiatives aimed at addressing these disparities along with ongoing challenges and potential solutions. Because gender disparities are in many factors in land ownership. Various factors are there, like cultural and social norms are there, because many cultures have traditionally favored male inheritance of land. So, this leading to entrenched gender disparity in land ownership, because now in day-to-day life, basically, although there are certain laws which govern these land rights for the governance of the land rights, and it is basically equally given to the women and the daughter and the son, women and the male and female, but in spite of that, in certain areas, it traditionally they favored male inheritance of the land, and that's why it leading to entrenched gender disparities in land ownership. There are legal barriers too, because in some countries discriminatory laws or customary practices, it restrict women's right to own, inherit or control land. So, there is discrimination also in various laws, in various customary practices, which prohibits the women from taking the land or inheriting the land or control over the land. Economic disadvantages, again one of the major concern here, because women may lack access to resources such as credit or education, which can impede their ability to acquire land. So this is also one of the factor for which the women suffer here. So there are legal provisions for the women's land rights, like we have many legal reforms, because many countries have enacted legal reforms to address these gender disparities in land ownership, including laws that guarantee women rights to own, inherit and they control land. Because constitutional protection is also given. Our constitution gives an equal right to the men and women. So some constitutions include provisions that uphold women's right to land ownership and prohibit discrimination based on gender. We have international agreements also, because such as the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. It provides a framework for promoting gender equality in land rights. So these legal reforms are like in various countries with significant reforms. We can see here certain laws are there. In India, we have the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, which is cornerstone in promoting the gender equality in matters of inheritance. It is a piece of legislation which basically deals or govern the inheritance and succession of all Hindus. So this act applies to all persons who is born Hindu, Buddhist, Jain or Sikh, but who is not a Muslim, a Christian or a Jew. So this act here, it basically outlined the process for the devolution of the property among the heirs. It gives an equal right to the daughters as well after the 2005 amendment in the Hindu Succession Act. So this act is basically a main legal reform in this step. So this amendment, it grants daughters equal rights as sons to inherit ancestral property. So it overrides any traditional customs or laws that previously denied daughters these rights, because after this amendment, now the daughters are regarded as a co-partner in the ancestral property. They have the same rights and obligation as the son in the ancestral property. They have given equal right by this Amendment Act of 2005. In Ethiopia, we have the revised Family Code 2000 and Rural Land Administration and Use Proclamation 2005, because these laws also here ensure women's equal rights to land during marriage, divorce and inheritance. So the Rural Land Administration and Use Proclamation, it mandates joint land certification for the spouses, promoting women's land tenure security. So in Ethiopia, we have this act, Rural Land Administration, which basically provide or ensure women's equal rights in respect of to land during the marriage. They will get during the marriage or by inheritance or after divorce. In Rwanda, we have Organic Land Law 2005. This law, it ensures equal rights for men and women to own and inherit land. The law also mandates joint registration of land for married couples, which has significantly increased women's land ownership. So this law also provides equal rights to the women also, as like the male have to inherit the land, to control over the land, and this mandates joint registration for married couples too, which has significantly increased women's land ownership. In Tanzania, we have the Land Act and Village Land Act 1999. These acts here provide for the equal treatment of women in the ownership and use of land. So they explicitly here state that women have the same rights as men to acquire, hold, use and deal with land. There are various countries with significant reforms. The example of laws I am giving here is regarding the country Ethiopia, Rwanda and Tanzania, in which the laws guaranteed women's to equally right as comparison to men. They have the same right as the right given to men. So the women's also inherit the land, they have control over the land. So these laws ensures equal rights and by this they promoting the gender equality in matter to in the inheritance matters or related matters like after marriage, after divorce, what would be the consequences. Now I will talk about the constitutional protections in various countries regarding and what is the impact of that one in respect of the land used by the women. In South Africa, if we talk about the South Africa country, there the constitutional of South Africa 1996 applied, and this constitution explicitly prohibits discrimination based on gender, and it ensures equal property rights. Section 25 of the Constitution of South Africa 1996 guarantees the right to property, while Section 9 of this Act, it promotes equality and non-discrimination. And the impact of this provision in this Act is Constitution of South Africa, that it have led to various legislative reforms that promote gender equality in property and land rights. The Land Reform, Labour Tenants Act and the extension of Security of Tenure Act have been instrumental in improving women's land tenure security. Ecuador, I am talking about here regarding the Ecuador, we have the Constitution of Ecuador 2008, the provision for the which guaranteed here equal rights for the women. Again, we have in this Constitution Article 324 which deals with this one, which guaranteed equal rights for women and men in the ownership and administration of property. So it also ensures here that both spouses have equal rights over family property. So the impact of this provision in the Constitution here has resulted in increased awareness and advocacy for women's land rights. Women in Ecuador have greater legal backing to challenge discriminatory practices and claim their rights to land and property. Talking about here Uganda, so there also the Constitution of Uganda 1995 as amended in 2005, their Article 33, it guarantees the women's rights, and it also provides for affirmative action to address gender imbalances, and by Article 26 which protects property rights, ensuring equal treatment in land ownership. So these constitutional guarantees have driven legislative changes to protect women's land rights, such as the Land Act of 1998. The focus here mainly on affirmative action, which has led to initiatives aimed at increasing women's access to land and improving their tenure, their security, contributing to greater gender equality in land ownership. Now I will talk about the agreements, international agreements with respect to the land rights given to the women, which promote gender equality in land rights. So now I will give an overview of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and other relevant treaties which are here to protect the land rights of the women and to promote gender equality in the land rights. For this we have this, this convention here was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1979 and it came into force in 1981. And the purpose of this Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women is, the main aim here is to eliminate discrimination against women in all areas of life. So basically it sets out an agenda for national action to end such discrimination. Article 14 of this convention here focuses on the rights of rural women, ensuring their participation in development planning, access to land and agrarian reforms. We have Article 16 in this convention which ensures equal rights for women in matters relating to marriage and family relations, including property and inheritance rights. Then we have Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Again, it was adopted during the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing, and the main aim of this treaty is basically to advance women's rights and gender equality globally, because the main emphasis of this declaration, Beijing Declaration, is to ensure women's equal access to economic resources, including land and property rights. Then we have International Covenant also on economic, social and cultural rights, and it was also adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1966, and it came into force in 1976. And the main purpose of this covenant, International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, is to ensure the protection of economic, social and cultural rights, including the right to an adequate standard of living. In Article 3, it is specifically given there that it obligates states to ensure equal rights of men and women to the enjoyment of all economic, social and cultural rights. In Article 11, this also provides or recognizes the right to an adequate standard of living, including adequate food, clothing and housing, implicating access to land. So, it recognizes the right to an adequate standard of living, the basic amenities of the life, to live their livelihood. Next, we have sustainable development goals in this area, like it was also adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015. And the main aim of this goal, sustainable development goal, is to address global challenges and promote sustainable development by 2030. Because the goal, sustainable development goal 5, it deals with achieving gender equality. Its main focus is on achieving gender equality, and it empower all women and girls, including the ensuring women's equal right to economic resources such as land and property. Goal 1 is equally important here because it ends poverty in all its forms, which includes ensuring property and inheritance rights for all, especially women. Now I will talk about the challenges here, because there were certain challenges which are faced by in implementing these provisions, these mechanisms, like lack of implementation is there, because despite legal provisions, we have so many provisions, like in India we have in Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, in Ethiopia, in Uganda. In my previous slide, I had already discussed with you that we have legal provisions in various countries. We have many international agreements, covenants, which deals with or providing or ensuring equal rights to the women. But in spite of that, in spite of these legal provisions here, enforcement mechanisms may be weak, resulting in limited impact on the ground, because due to the lack of the implementation here, it cannot result in the full form, in the full way, like the women's, even now also all the women's did not get their rights in the land, because they are not aware of their land rights. They were still now be discriminated. So that's why there is a lack of implementation. Resistance to change, because cultural norms and traditional practices, it can be deeply entrenched, making it challenging to change attitude towards women's land rights, because these cultural norms and traditional practices, it again nowadays also entrenched the life, and making it challengeable to change the attitude of the people towards the women's land rights. In many areas, in many states, even now also, in the backward areas, the women are not aware of their land rights. Next is land grabbing, because large scale land acquisition by the corporations or the government, it can displace local communities, including women, from their land without adequate compensation or alternative livelihood options. So this again put a challenge, or in giving equality in the land rights of as equal to men, because it can displace, or including women, other communities, local communities. These corporations, they acquire land in a large scale, so that's why they are not given adequate compensation to live their livelihood. The potential solutions are here mentioned like legal awareness and education, by which these rights can be given to the women, or the land rights. The women can get their land rights by because they are not aware. So increasing awareness is required here of existing laws and women's rights to land ownership through education and advocacy. It can empower women to assert their rights. So this solution is it can be helpful in this field when the women's are not aware of their rights. So by increasing awareness, by organizing these programs, awareness programs or workshops of the existing laws and the women's rights to land ownership through education or through advocacy, it can empower the women to assert their rights. Community engagement is essential for this one, because engaging with local communities, including traditional leaders and elders, to promote gender sensitive land governance and decision making processes is equally important. So by including traditional leaders and elders, they here help in promoting the gender sensitive land governance and the decision making processes, so they can engage with these local communities. Again, by giving economic empowerment, because providing women with access to credit, training and other resources to support their participation in agricultural and other income generating activities. So by providing women with the access to credit for themselves, the training and the other resources, they can support their participation in various agricultural productivity and other income generating activities. Next, we have legal aid and support services. Again, by ensuring the access to legal aid and support services for women facing land related disputes or challenges. If they have a dispute regarding the untimely, you can say that regarding the title, regarding the ownership, regarding the use and control of the land, then they can get legal aid and support services for facing these disputes or challenges. By implementing land reforms which prioritize here gender equality, it also including measures to redistribute land more equitably and address historical injustices. Monitoring and accountability is one of again one of the main point, because by establishing mechanisms to monitor the implementation of laws and policies related to women's land rights and holding governments and other stakeholders accountable for their commitments. So addressing gender disparities in land ownership, it requires a comprehensive approach that combines legal reforms, community engagement, economic empowerment and ongoing monitoring and advocacy efforts. So by working together across sectors and stakeholders, meaningful progress can be made towards achieving gender equality in land rights. So these are the solutions which must be kept in mind, which must be taken into consideration, which requires a comprehensive approach, but that combines these legal reforms, community engagement, economic empowerment by providing legal aid. So by working together, they can progress more by achieving gender equality in land rights. Now I will talk about the law of succession for women in India, which is a very important legislation here for the gender equality in the matter of succession and inheritance. The inheritance laws in India have a profound impact on the socio-economic status and the empowerment of women. The legal landscape of succession is multifaceted, with diverse personal laws governing inheritance rights based on religion, caste and community. This essay here I am talking about here, to the aim of this law of succession to provide a comparative analysis of the laws of succession for women in India, which basically focused on key legislation such as the Hindu Succession Act, Muslim Personal Law and Indian Succession Act. Because personal laws, these inheritance laws, it typically refers to the body of laws that deals with the personal matters such as marriage, divorce, inheritance, and family matters. And these laws, these inheritance laws, it may differ based on cultural, religious, and customary practices, and it may differ in from the general laws of the country. So that's why here the evolution of succession laws in India is influenced by a combination of indigenous customs, colonial legacies, and modern legal reforms. The traditional practices often favored male primogeniture, leading to unequal distribution of inherited property among male and female heirs. Colonial interventions, which introduced codified laws, yet they often perpetuated here gender biases and discriminatory practices. The legal framework governing succession in India is diverse, comprising personal laws applicable to different religious communities alongside statutory laws. The Hindu Succession Act of 1956, it based on the principles of Mitakshara and Dayabhaga schools, which governs succession among Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and Sikhs. Muslim personal law is primarily based on Islamic Sharia, with variations between Sunni and Shia interpretations. The Indian Succession Act of 1925, it applies to Christians, Parsis, and Jews and others. So now I am talking about the Hindu Succession Act 1956, which underwent significant amendment in 2005 to enhance women's inheritance rights. Because before the amendment, daughters had limited right in the ancestral property as compared to sons. The reforms introduced equal right for the daughters in ancestral property and copartnery, challenging patriarchal norms and promoting gender equality. However, challenges persist in the effective implementation of these provisions, particularly in patriarchal and conservative societies. So, this Hindu Succession Act, it mainly outlines the process for the devolution of property among heirs. It outlines the, it basically deals with class 1 heirs, class 2 heirs, who will be the, if the person died without making any will, in that is interstate succession. So, in that case, who will inherit the property. So, it governs that one, and after this 2005 amendment, the daughters are given equal rights as compared to sons. They are now co-partners. Now, Muslim personal law, I am talking about here Muslim law, the Islamic law, which is basically set down a set of rules which outline the based on Quran and Hadith, the action and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad here. So, this Islamic law, it governs inheritance rights among Muslims in India, with Sunni and Shia sects following distinct interpretations. While Sharia provides for fixed shares for female heirs, including daughters, wives, and mothers, critics argue that women's entitlements are often overshadowed by the male relatives. The lack of codification and varying interpretations, it contribute to uncertainties and disparities in women's inheritance rights. Now, I will talk about the Hindu Succession Act 1925, because this Hindu Succession Act 1925, it governs the succession and inheritance for all religious denominations, including Christian, Jews, and Parsis. So, this Indian Succession Act, it governs the succession among Christians, Parsis, Jews, and other communities, while it provides for equitable distribution of property among the heirs. Gender biases and customary practices sometimes undermine women's entitlements. Moreover, complexities in probate and succession procedures, it poses challenges for women, particularly those from marginalized communities. A comparative assessment here reveals both the similarities and the divergences in inheritance laws across religious communities, because we have for Hindus the Hindu Succession Act, for Muslim personal law, Muslim we have this Islamic law, Muslim personal law. For the Christian, for the governance of inheritance and succession matters in for the community, for Christian, Jew and Parsis, we have this Indian Succession Act. So there are the comparative assessment, it reveals here both similarities as well as divergence in inheritance laws across religious communities. While reforms in the Hindu Succession Act have advanced here gender equality, so similar progress is lacking in Muslim personal law due to the conservative interpretations and resistance to change. The Indian Succession Act, although secular in nature, it faces challenges in ensuring equitable outcomes for women. That's why these laws often vary, which based on cultural, which based on their religious or customary practices. That's why these laws have different these persons, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jews, Parsis, they were governed by the different laws. Now the challenges and issues which were faced by the act is women in India here encounter numerous challenges in asserting their inheritance rights, including societal norms, legal complexities and lack of awareness. Patriarchal attitudes and customary practices often undermine women's claims to inherited property, perpetuating socio-economic disparities and gender inequality. So, moreover, the procedural hurdles here and delays in legal proceedings which exacerbate the vulnerability of women, especially in cases of contested inheritance. So, these are the challenges which are encountered by the women in India with respect to their inheritance rights, including their societal norms, the legal complexities and lack of awareness. So, these issues were faced here by the women. In conclusion, this law of succession in India, it reflects a complex interplay of legal, cultural and social factors which shaping women's inheritance rights. While reforms have sought to promote gender equality, persistent challenges and disparities underscore the need for continued advocacy, legal literacy and social mobilization. Efforts to reform inheritance laws must prioritize women's empowerment and equitable access to inherited property, fostering inclusive and just societies. So, these laws of succession in India, it reflect a complex interplay of the legal, cultural and social norms, social factors which shaping here women's inheritance rights. Now, I am going to discuss here the case laws which are there dealing with the inheritance rights and the succession among the succession laws for women. So, in India, the succession laws for women have undergone significant reforms over the years to promote gender equality, as I had already discussed in my previous slide, and it provides women with equal rights to inherit property. So, the main legislation here governing succession in India is the Hindu Succession Act 1956, which applies to all Hindus, Buddhists, Jains and Sikhs. However, Muslim law are governed by the Muslim women are governed by the Muslim Personal Law Application Act, Shariat Application Act 1937. Christian women are governed by the Indian Succession Act 1925. So, first we will start with the Hindu Succession Act 1956, because before its amendment in 2005, the act discriminated against women by granting them limited inheritance rights. However, the Amendment Act 2005 here brought about significant changes, making the succession laws more gender neutral. So, its main aim here is to to avoid the inequality and provide the gender equality in matter of succession to the women. So, under the amended act, daughters now have equal rights as sons in the ancestral property and have co-partitionary rights, because before the Amendment Act 2005 in the Hindu Succession Act, the case of Janama versus Amar here is significant, because in this case the Supreme Court of India ruled that daughters have co-partnership rights in joint Hindu family property by birth, irrespective of whether the father was alive or not at the time of the amendment. So, this judgment here paved the way for equal inheritance rights for daughters in ancestral property. For Muslim women, succession laws are governed by the Muslim Personal Law Shariat Application Act 1937. So, in Muslim law, daughters are entitled to inherit from their parents, but their share may be lesser than that of sons in certain situations. However, there have been ongoing debates and demands for reforms in Muslim personal laws to provide equal rights to women in inheritance as we have in the Hindu Succession Act, Amendment Act 2005 in India. So, similarly, Christian women are governed by the Indian Succession Act 1925. This act also provides for equal inheritance rights for sons and daughters in the absence of a will. But however, if there is a will, then the distribution of property may vary according to the wishes of the deceased person. So, overall, while there have been significant strides towards gender equality in succession laws in India, there are still challenges and disparities that need to be addressed, especially concerning women's inheritance rights in certain religious communities. Daughters as a co-partner, this is again a step towards gender equality, because in patriarchal societies like India, property ownership and inheritance have historically been skewed in favor of male descendants, perpetuating gender disparities and inhibiting women's economic empowerment. However, the amendment to the Hindu Succession Act in 2005, it granting daughters the equal rights as a co-partners in ancestral property, it marked a significant milestone towards the advancing gender equality in inheritance laws. So, it explores the implications of daughters becoming co-partners and its role in fostering gender equality, because traditionally what happened, the Hindu law recognized only the male descendants as a co-partner in ancestral property, excluding the daughters from the inheritance rights. So, this practice was rooted in patriarchal norms and the concept of male primogeniture, and the daughters were often relegated to subordinate roles in property matters, reinforcing gender-based inequalities and perpetuating socio-economic disparities. But the legal framework prior to the Amendment Act 2005, the daughters, as I had mentioned in my previous slide, that daughters had limited rights in the ancestral property as compared to sons before the Amendment Act of 2005, but they were entitled to only a limited estate before this amendment in ancestral property, and their rights were contingent upon the existence of male heirs. So, this discriminatory provision, it reflected deep-seated gender biases and hindered the women's autonomy and financial security too. But after the amendment to the Hindu Succession Act, it brought about a paradigm shift by recognizing daughters as a co-partners in ancestral property on par with sons. So, this landmark reform overturned centuries-old discriminatory practices and it conferred equal inheritance rights to daughters. So, as co-partners, daughters here gained the right to demand partition, inherit ancestral property, exercise control over their share of the estate. So, this is the main impact here, I can say, of this amendment, 2005 amendment, that now the women have equal rights, the daughters have equal rights as son in the ancestral property. Now they can demand, they can access they inherit ancestral property, they can exercise control over their share of the estate. Recognition of the daughters as a co-partners, it represents a significant role towards gender equality. in inheritance laws. This is an impact of this one, to recognize the daughters as a co-partners by the 2005 amendment, which greatly impacted on the gender equality. So by dismantling entrenched patriarchal norms and challenging traditional notions of property ownership, the amendment empowers women economically, socially, and legally. It promotes women's agency and autonomy, enabling them to assert their rights and participate more actively in decision-making processes within the family. But despite the legal reforms, despite we have certain laws, the challenges persist in realizing the full potential of daughters as a co-partners, because we have so many societal attitudes, because deep-rooted patriarchal attitudes resist to the change, and the customary practices continue to impede women's access to land, control over the inherited property. So, moreover, the effective implementation of the amendment requires concerted efforts to raise awareness, combat gender stereotypes, and address legal complexities. So, despite these legal reforms, the challenges still persist in our society. Realizing the full potential of the daughters as a co-partner, because they don't want to accept this thing that now the daughters have the equal rights as a son. So even in our patriarchal, deep-rooted patriarchal attitudes, this resistance to the change and the customary practices going on, it continue to impede again the women's access to and control over their inherited property. Now I will talk about the future directions and the recommendations, because this is the path ahead to maximize the impact of daughters becoming co-partners. Concerted efforts are needed at multiple levels here, because legal literacy programs, it should be promoted to educate women about their rights and entitlements. Social campaigns aimed at challenging gender stereotypes and promoting gender sensitive inheritance practices, which can help and shift societal attitudes too. Additionally, ensuring effective implementation and enforcement of the amendment here is crucial for realizing its transformative potential, because to maximize the impact of the daughters becoming co-partner here, efforts are regularly needed at multiple levels. We have certain programs we have to organize, we have to aware the women's about their rights, about the access of the land, about their inheritance rights, about the succession rights as per the Hindu Succession Act 1956. So this is crucial for realizing its transformative potential. In the last, I would like to conclude that the recognition of daughters as a co-partners in ancestral property under the Hindu Succession Act, it represents a significant milestone towards the gender equality in inheritance laws, because this is a major step taken by the government by amending this Hindu Succession Act 1956 to avoid that practice which was there earlier in the Hindu Succession Act 1956. The provision is there that the daughters had given limited access to the land. So here, by conferring equal rights to daughters, the amendment here not only rectifies historical injustices but also paves the way for greater gender parity and women's empowerment. However, sustained efforts are required to address these societal attitudes and ensure the full realization of women's inheritance rights, thereby fostering inclusive and egalitarian societies. Daughters as a co-partner, a step towards gender equality, as I had already discussed, because the recognition of daughters as a co-partner, it make a significant advancement in the pursuit of gender equality in societies. with traditional joint family systems like India. So this is one of the step towards gender equality here. This legal reform here empowers daughters not only economically but socially and culturally, ensuring they are no longer marginalized when it comes to property inheritance. So it eliminates discriminatory practices. It fosters financial independence here and challenges deeply ingrained gender biases. So, beyond the legal aspect, it signals a shift in societal attitudes, promoting the idea that daughters are equal stakeholders in the family prosperity. However, the implementation of these rights, it faces certain challenges too, including a lack of awareness, resistance from the family members, and legal complexities. But despite these hurdles here, recognizing daughter as a co-partners by this Amendment Act 2005, it represents a pivotal step in the path toward gender equality, offering a brighter, fairer future where the individuals are judged by their abilities and not their gender. So, empowering daughter through compassionary right is a crucial step towards the gender equality and women empowerment, particularly in societies with traditionally joint family systems like India. Because compassionary rights here ensure that women have a rightful share in the compassionary property, in the compassionary rights, which can include land, which can include here houses, other valuable assets. So this ownership here provides them with a tangible and often substantial economic asset. Owning property through compassionary rights offer women a form of financial security. So they have an asset here that can serve as a safety net in times of financial needs, such as emergencies, such as unexpected expenses. So property ownership here allows women to accumulate assets over a time, and these assets can appreciate in value. It can generate rental income or serve as a collateral for loans, enabling them to access credit for various purposes, including investment or starting a business. So, women with compassionary rights can choose to invest in their inherited property or use it as a foundation for other investments also. So, this can lead to wealth accumulation and financial growth. Property ownership can empower women to start their business or ventures, particularly if they have access to land or commercial property. They can establish agricultural activities too, rental properties, small businesses that generate income and contribute to their economic independence. So, having property rights, it can influence women's educational and career decisions here. Now, I will talk about the significance of providing the equal property rights to the daughters, to women, as by this Amendment Act in the Hindu Succession Act. So, this is monumental changing in the social status of women in society. Basically, women were always considered inferior citizens due to the belief that women were secondary to men. So there is a conception in people's mind that women are solely meant to do only the domestic work. So they should here dedicate their life only to their husband and family, and the equal property rights granted by the Hindu Succession Amendment Act. It is an instrumental tool by which it promotes the economic stability of women in the society. So, the equal property rights are here guaranteed by the Amendment Act in the Hindu Succession Act 2005. Next, here I will talk about the increasing women's access to land. Increasing women access to land is again crucial for promoting gender equality, empowering women economically, and advancing sustainable development too. because here are some strategies and the interventions to enhance their access to land, in which foremost one is legal reform, because by enacting and enforcing laws which guaranteed the women rights to own, inherit and control their land, by amending existing laws to eliminate discriminatory provisions and ensure gender biased, gender neutral land rights, by recognizing and protecting the customary land rights of indigenous women and the marginalized communities too, by facilitating the issuance of land titles and registration of property in the names of women. So, by this we can increase women's access to land, simplify land titling procedure and reduce bureaucratic barriers to land ownership for women, provide financial and technical support here to women for land registration and documentation processes. We can have gender responsive land governance, because by promoting this gender sensitive land governance framework that prioritize here women's land rights. So, it ensure women's representation and participation in land related decision making bodies and institutions, strengthen land administration systems to prevent land grabbing and protect women from the land related disputes and conflicts. Then we have access to credit and financial services, because by providing this access to credit, the loans and the financial services to invest in land purchase and cultivations, again it can enhance or increase the women's access to land. Establish women friendly lending schemes and microfinance initiatives tailored to the needs of female landholders. Support women's collective initiatives such as women's land cooperatives to pool resources and access credit for land acquisition and development. Land distribution and agrarian reform, by implementing this one to allocate land to the landless and the marginalized women. Again, by this we can increase the women's access to land by prioritize women headed households, vulnerable groups in land redistribution initiatives, by ensuring that land reform policies incorporate gender perspectives and address intersecting inequalities, by capacity building and legal literacy, again by providing training and capacity building programs, we can enhance the women's knowledge of land rights, their legal entitlements and land management practices. Women empowerment and leadership, again this is one of the step here, by promoting women's leadership and representation in land related decision making processes at the community, local and national levels, by strengthening women's land rights movements and advocacy networks to mobilize for policy reforms, investing in women's education by skill development, empowerment initiatives to enhance their agency and bargaining power. Now, in the last I will talk about why is increasing women's access to land is important. Why it is important to increase women's access to land? Because it is central to women's economic empowerment, as land can serve as a base for food production and income generation, as collateral for credit and as a means of holding savings for the future. Land is also a social asset that is crucial for cultural identity, political power and participation in decision making. So, women's equal access to land is basically a human right issue. So, it also has other benefits too. Evidence here shows that women land rights reduce domestic violence, that women who own land are more capable of exiting violent relationships and negotiating safe sex. Agricultural production and food security also increase when women are granted tenure security. So, I think by this session now you will be able to understand about the laws which are there to give equal rights to the women, not only in the India but also in Ethiopia, Uganda, and there for Muslim personal laws we have the certain it is governed by the Islamic law, and in the Christian Parsis Jews they are governed by the Hindu Succession Act 1925. So, there are various laws and legal reforms in protecting the rights of the women, as well as to give promote gender equality in matters of succession and inheritance. So it is very essential to know about their rights, how to access their land. So for this we have to organize certain programs. Increasing their access to land is important because here it can serve as a base for food production, the land, and income generation is important as collateral for credit. So it is a mean of holding savings for the future by creating or giving empowering the women. So it is a social asset, the land, which is crucial here for cultural identity, political power and participation. Thank you.